I have to say, Batumi Beach is somewhat more peaceful than Brighton Beach at this time of year. It's a perfect place to meditate, calm, and break away some of the rust from not recording videos for so long. It's about time I got back into it, and as they say, teaching is the best way to learn something. And that's sort of what I'm doing here, but I hope today's video will be useful nonetheless. Today I just want to cover some of the basics regarding the shadow, which is a core concept in Jungian psychology, and shadow work forming one of the cornerstones of Jungian coaching. Might be a term you've heard before, and there are some misunderstandings about what the shadow means. So I want to clarify some of that today. The shadow is really the unconscious parts of our persona, the parts of our personality that we repress, and everybody has one. And if you think about how this is formed, it really all begins in the very first few years of life. As we learn and develop, we come to understand what works by way of allowing us to survive, certain characteristics that yield love from our parents, and what allows us to belong, what behaviours and ways of seeing the world allow us to fit in as part of the social group. And around this we form what's known as the persona. This is the aspects of ourselves that we identify with strongly and that we present to the world. Persona meaning mask. It's what actors used to wear in ancient Greece. This was called the persona. But of course, that is not truly who we are. And so the Jungian model builds quite heavily really on teachings of the Eastern religions, the Upanishads being a large part of this, ancient Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism. And so by virtue of identifying with certain aspects of our personality exclusively, we cast what we think we are not into our shadow. In other words, we repress those aspects of ourselves that on some unconscious level we have deemed to be unhelpful, not conducive to survival, or maybe not conducive to fitting in as part of the group. Now, the shadow is often associated with unwholesome qualities, the negative, whether it's anger, hatred, whether it's greed, whether it's lack of control. Well, the truth is, it does come with a lack of control by virtue of it being unconscious. But it's not necessarily unwholesome. It just means parts of ourselves that we've pushed away. The problems then arise, of course, when those aspects of ourselves do become present, but we're not conscious of them. And so when they appear, we necessarily perceive them as external. We project them, in other words. And we do this because they are bound by a feeling. There's always an emotion associated with characteristics that are in the shadow. So whether we identify as someone who's, say, being especially caring, someone who's especially driven, someone who's very fun-loving and social, or say someone who has a very strong spiritual persona, the shadow is going to be the complete opposite of that. So someone who sees themselves as very caring and very much capable of helping other people get their needs met, well, the shadow of that is going to be someone who is perhaps selfish, uncaring, only out for themselves. And of course, we all have the need to look after ourselves, right? But what can happen is, if someone who's identifying as being caring doesn't feel that the other person is fulfilling that image of themselves, then the shadow comes out. The shadow, being unconscious, can take control. And so the persona serves a purpose, but when we reach a point in life where the persona no longer serves us or is no longer sufficient for dealing with the challenges we face, it becomes very powerful to start looking at those sides of ourselves we've actually pushed away and realizing that we aren't what we think we are. We're actually far more than that. We are infinitely more than our persona that we've identified with. And so shadow work through coaching is really where the coach will help you to come and see your own shadow. And by virtue of it being unconscious, this is something that we can't really do on our own, not in any deep sense. It's very deeply buried, and it's there for a reason. But because it manifests externally, the external world is a real gift to us, and the external world is often how we actually engage with ourselves. When we think we're going out there and addressing challenges in the real world, so to speak, what we're really doing is changing ourselves, and we're using our experience as a way to see into ourselves, see what we've repressed, so that we can make it conscious, face up to the emotion that is holding that back or holding that in us, and break free from that conditioning. And that then makes us much more capable, much more resilient, ultimately much more peaceful and joyful as we go about life. So that's just a very short intro to the shadow and what shadow work consists of. This is not something you can do alone. It's also not something I'd recommend even attempting on your own, because it can be a very challenging process. And that's why you need a coach or some kind of guide who understands the work, who's done the work, and is compassionate to the challenges of going through that work, but understands the benefits. So that's all from me today, guys. Hope that was useful. I shall chat to you next time.